The human soldier who defied all odds to save a paralyzed alien warrior. The sky was burning red. Explosions shook the ground as smoke covered everything around. Captain Ray Walker ran through the battlefield, his armor broken, his helmet cracked. His squad was gone, all of them, only he was alive now. Alone in the middle of a war zone, the air smelled like metal and fire. He could hear the enemy ships flying above, searching for survivors. Ray's legs were tired, but he kept moving. He didn't want to die not here. Not like this. Suddenly, he heard a sound. It was not a human scream. It was deep, rough, and full of pain. Ray stopped and raised his rifle. He walked slowly toward the noise, every step quiet and careful. Behind a pile of rocks and broken metal. He saw it, an alien warrior trapped under heavy rubble. It was one of the Zarkon, a species known for their power and hate toward humans. They were tall, covered in strong armor, with sharp horns on their heads and glowing red eyes. This one looked badly hurt. His legs were crushed, and blood was leaking from his side. He was breathing hard, and his eyes were full of pain. Ray aimed his rifle at the alien's head. His finger touched the trigger. The alien didn't fight. Didn't move. He just looked at Ray. There was something strange in his eyes, not anger. Not hate, but something else. Fear, maybe, or hope. Ray stood there, confused. This alien was supposed to be the enemy. His people had killed many humans. Even some of Ray's friends. But right now, he didn't look like a monster. He looked like someone who didn't want to die. Ray lowered his rifle. The alien blinked. Surprised, Ray spoke. "Can you understand me?" The alien moved his head slowly. A weak nod. Ray looked around. If someone saw him helping the enemy, he could be arrested, maybe even killed. But he couldn't walk away, not like this. Ray dropped his gun and started pulling at the rubble. The metal was heavy, and his hands bled as he moved it. The alien groaned in pain, but didn't scream. After a few minutes, Ray freed him. The alien's legs were completely crushed. He couldn't walk. Ray tore a piece of cloth from his own uniform and wrapped it around the bleeding wounds. He looked at the alien and said, "I can't carry you far. But I'll try." Ray dragged a broken hover stretcher from a nearby wreck. He placed the alien carefully on it. The alien was heavy, almost double Ray's weight, but Ray didn't stop. He pulled the stretcher into the nearby forest ruins. Old stone walls and trees gave them some cover. Ray found a small cave and pulled the stretcher inside. The alien looked at him and finally spoke, his voice low and rough. "Why?" Ray looked at him. "Because you're alive." The alien closed his eyes. Thinking, Ray sat at the edge of the cave. Holding his rifle again, enemy drones passed overhead. Searching for survivors, Ray didn't move. Didn't breathe too loud. One mistake, and they were both dead. The drone moved on, and the forest became quiet again. Ray turned to the alien. "What's your name?" The alien said. Valor. Ray nodded. "I'm Ray." Valor looked at him and said, "You should have killed me." Ray shrugged. "Maybe," he said. "But I didn't." The fire from the battlefield still burned in the sky. Lighting the clouds above, Ray knew they had little time. Rescue wouldn't come, not for him. And definitely not for an enemy. But he also knew something else. Something inside him said this moment mattered. That saving this one life, this one alien, could change everything. As he sat in the darkness beside a warrior who once would have killed him, he felt no hate, only a strange, quiet hope. Asterisk, the human soldier who defied all odds to save a paralyzed alien warrior, Captain Ray Walker, didn't sleep that night. He sat by the entrance of the cave. Watching the shadows move with the wind, his rifle was in his hands. But his eyes kept turning to the alien lying behind him. Valor, the warrior who should have been his enemy. But now he was something else, wounded, helpless. and depending on a human to survive. Ray hadn't planned this. He was trained to follow orders, trained to fight, not to feel, but leaving Valor to die. That wasn't in his nature, even if it meant breaking the rules, even if it meant risking his own life. At sunrise, Ray searched the area for food. He found a crashed drone and stripped it for parts. Then, using wire and a power cell, he made a small fire. He cooked a pack of dry rations, then helped Valor sit up. The alien winced in pain, but said nothing. Ray held a water pouch to his mouth. "Drink slow," he said. "You lost a lot of blood." Valor looked at him, confused. "Why are you doing this?" Ray didn't answer at first. He stared at the fire, then said, "I saw you on the battlefield. You could have killed one of our medics," Ray continued. "But you didn't. I saw you drag him to cover." Even though he was human, Valor was silent for a moment. Then whispered, "He was just a boy." Ray nodded. "Yeah, and that was it. No more questions, no more doubts." Ray had made his decision. He was going to save this alien. No matter what, no matter the cost. Suddenly, Ray's communicator buzzed. He grabbed it fast and turned the volume down. The signal was weak, but he heard a voice. "Command to Alpha 3, do you copy?" Ray pressed the button. "Alpha 3 here, alive." One survivor understood. The voice said, "Evac in 36 hours." Sector 9, Ray's heart sank. Sector 9 was far. Maybe 2 days away with a healthy soldier. But with a paralyzed alien on a hover stretcher, it felt impossible. "Confirm your position and condition," the voice asked. Ray paused. "Position compromised." "But I can move." He looked at Valor, who was half conscious again. Ray knew what command would say if he told the full truth. He knew they'd say, "Leave the alien," but he couldn't. He turned off the communicator. That was the moment, the true moment, the one where Ray Walker, the perfect soldier, became something more. A man who followed his heart instead of orders. He started working right away. He used broken metal parts to reinforce the hover stretcher. He strapped a solar panel to its side so it could recharge in the sunlight. He crafted a makeshift shelter using parts of a ruined drone and tree branches. Valor watched him quietly, eyes full of confusion and something else. "Respect, maybe, or wonder, you know," Ray said. "You're heavier than you look." Valor let out a weak sound. It was almost a laugh. By nightfall, they were ready. Ray studied the map on his tablet, drawing a new path that avoided enemy patrols. It would take longer, but it was safer. The next morning, just before sunrise, they left the cave. Ray pulled the stretcher behind him. The ropes digging into his hands. He didn't care. Every step was a fight against pain and exhaustion. But he kept going. They passed through thick forests, over broken hills, across shallow rivers. Ray stopped only to rest for minutes, never hours. He found wild fruits and shared them with Valor at night. He set traps for small animals and stayed awake, guarding them both. The alien's condition got worse. One night, he coughed up black blood. Ray knelt beside him, shaking him awake. "No dying," Ray said. "Not until we make it out." Valor opened his eyes slowly. "You are." "Strange," he whispered. "Yeah." Ray smiled. "I get that a lot," as they moved through a narrow canyon. A loud beep echoed from Ray's communicator. It was a direct message from command. "All soldiers are to report enemy sightings, including live captures. If any enemy is seen moving with our wounded, they are to be terminated." Ray stared at the message. Then he deleted it. He looked at Valor and said, "We're not going back, we're going forward," and the alien nodded. Not as an enemy, but as a brother in war. The human soldier who defied all odds to save a paralyzed alien warrior. Ray pulled the stretcher through dry grass and broken roots. His boots were torn. His lips cracked from heat. The sun was high. and the desert trail stretched far ahead. Behind him, Valor lay silent. His body still weak, but his eyes always watching. They had moved far from the cave now, too far to turn back. But the closer they got to Sector 9, the more dangerous it became. Enemy patrols were now scanning the area, and worse drones were everywhere. Small flying machines, scanning heat and movement. Ray knew one wrong step would mean death. They entered a narrow pass between tall stone cliffs. Ray pulled the stretcher into the shadows and paused to rest. His hands were raw, his back screamed with pain. But he didn't stop for long. Every second mattered. He opened his communicator again, hoping for a signal. Nothing, just static. He closed it and looked at Valor. "You doing okay?" he asked. Valor nodded weakly. "Alive, that's good enough," Ray said. Forcing a small smile, suddenly, a sharp, buzzing noise came from above. Ray's head shot up. A black drone flew over the cliffs. Scanning the rocks below, he dropped to the ground, pulling the stretcher into a cave opening. The drone hovered, scanning the trail, then moved on. Ray didn't move until it was gone. "That was close," he whispered. Valor stared at him. "They're hunting," Ray nodded. "Yeah. And they're getting closer." That night, they camped behind a fallen transport truck. Ray opened a damaged medkit and injected Valor with a healing serum. It wouldn't fix his legs, but it kept him stable while Valor slept. Ray wrote something in his wrist pad. "A log entry. If I don't make it, whoever finds this, tell Command I chose this path. This alien saved a boy once. So I'm returning the favor. Not everything in war has to be hate in the morning." The air was colder. Ray felt it before he saw it movement. Tracks in the sand that weren't theirs. Someone had passed by during the night, but hadn't found them. Not yet. Ray pushed harder, dragging the stretcher through a dried riverbed. He knew there was an old comms tower nearby. If they reached it, he could call for emergency evac. But that meant crossing the ridge on open area with no cover. Ray looked at Valor. "We don't have another option," Valor answered. "Then we go." They moved slowly, carefully, across the ridge. Every minute, Ray stopped to scan the sky. But halfway through, a sharp noise cut the air. A spotlight turned on. One of the enemy drones had spotted them. "Go!" Ray shouted, even though there was nowhere to run. He pushed the stretcher faster, running to a group of broken rocks. Laser shots hit the ground beside them, sending sand flying. Ray rolled over the stretcher, shielding Valor with his own body. Another blast hit a nearby rock, throwing dust into the air. Ray raised his rifle and fired at the drone. 3 shots, 1 lucky hit. The drone sparked and crashed, but more were coming. Ray could hear engines in the distance. Troops were on their way. "We need cover," Ray yelled, dragging the stretcher behind a boulder. Valor grabbed a small plasma pistol from Ray's belt. He aimed it with both hands, breathing hard. "They'll be here in minutes," Ray said. Valor looked at him. "Then we fight for minutes." Ray nodded. "Just long enough to reach that tower." He opened his bag and pulled out a flare beacon. "This thing's old, but if I can get it close to the comms tower, it'll boost the signal." Ray gave Valor an extra mag and said, "By me 5 minutes." Valor didn't smile, but his eyes burned with fire. Ray ran, fast and low. Zigzagging between rocks, enemy fire followed him, red beams lighting the air. Valor fired from his position, hitting one, then to enemy drones. Ray reached the tower base, slammed the flare into the slot. A green light blinked, then turned blue. Signal activated. He shouted into the communicator. "Emergency evac, Sector 9, urgent, hostile contact." The tower sparked and sent the message, but then Ray felt a sharp pain. His shoulder exploded with fire. He dropped to one knee, blood pouring down his arm. Valor saw it from afar and screamed something in his own language. Ray turned, fired back at the soldier who shot him. He hit the enemy square in the chest. The noise faded. For a moment, all was still. Ray dropped beside the tower, clutching his wound. He looked to the horizon and saw it 3 evac ships breaking through the clouds. He smiled, weak and bloody. Then everything went dark. The human soldier who defied all odds to save a paralyzed alien warrior. The rescue ships landed in fire and dust. Their engines roared as they touched the rocky ground of Sector 9. Soldiers in silver armor jumped out. Guns ready, scanning the area, they found Ray first. Lying at the base of the old Combs Tower, bleeding and unconscious. 2 medics rushed to him, checking his vitals. "He's alive," one said, "badly injured." "But stable," another voice called from nearby. "We found something else." A small group of soldiers stood around the hover stretcher, their faces tight with anger as they saw what lay on it. A wounded Zarkon warrior, paralyzed, bloodied, but breathing. They raised their rifles. "Wait," someone shouted. "He's not resisting, still an enemy," the squad leader said. "Protocol is clear." Before they could act, Ray coughed and opened his eyes. He tried to stand, but pain shot through his body. "Don't shoot," he gasped. The soldiers turned, surprised. "You brought him here?" The squad leader asked. "This thing?" Ray nodded, wincing. "His name is Valor. He's not a thing. You're injured." "Captain," the leader said, "let's get you back to base." Ray looked at Valor. Then back at the leader. "He comes with me." A long silence followed. One of the medics whispered, "Sir, this could cost you your rank." Ray didn't care. He stood slowly, blood still dripping down his arm. "I don't leave people behind," he said. "Human or not," the squad leader frowned. Then tapped his comm device. "Command, we have a situation," he said. "Captain Walker is refusing to follow standard evac protocol." Ray could hear the reply. Even though it was full of static, "Is he protecting the alien?" "Yes, sir. He is to be detained upon return." Ray closed his eyes for a second, then opened them again. He walked to Valora's stretcher and placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'll find a way," he whispered. The squad leader signaled the troops, "Secure the alien. Take the captain into custody." Ray raised his rifle not to shoot, but to block them. "Don't make me fight my own people," he said. The soldiers hesitated. This was Ray Walker, hero of the Ice War. Survivor of the 10-day siege, he was a legend, and now? He stood between them and a wounded enemy. "Ray," one soldier said, "you're asking us to disobey orders." Ray looked at them, his eyes full of fire. "I'm asking you to do the right thing." The squad leader stepped forward. "You've lost your mind." But then Valor spoke. His voice low but steady. "Let him go," he said. "I won't fight." Ray turned to him, shocked. "You'll die in their hands," he said. Valor looked at him. "I already died on that battlefield, but you gave me something more than life. You gave me honor." He placed something small in Ray's hand. A glowing crystal, the symbol of a Zarkon war bond. Ray clenched it in his fist, then lowered his rifle. "You take him," Ray said to the soldiers. "But if you harm him, I'll know." He walked toward the ship. Not as a hero, but as a prisoner. Inside the ship, he sat in silence. 2 guards stood nearby, but didn't speak. Ray stared out the window as the engines roared to life. Below, Valor was loaded into a separate vessel. Surrounded by soldiers, Ray knew what was coming. Interrogations. Court-martial, disgrace. Maybe even prison, but he didn't regret it. Not for 1 second. Back at the military base, news spread fast. A human soldier had saved a Zarkon. Some called him a traitor, others called him a fool. But a few, just a few, called him brave. In a cold metal room, Ray sat in front of a tribunal. 3 commanders, stone-faced, reviewed his report. "You disobeyed direct orders." One said, "You aided the enemy," said another. Ray stayed silent. Then the 3rd commander spoke. "And yet, the alien you saved is requesting an audience with the human council." Ray's head lifted, surprised. "He claims you changed his view of our kind. He wants peace." The room went quiet. Ray leaned forward and said, "Maybe that's what this war needs. Not more weapons, but one act of mercy." The tribunal didn't reply. Ray was escorted back to his holding room. But this time, no one called him a traitor. Not out loud. Outside the base, reporters gathered. Stories began to spread of a human soldier who saved a wounded alien, of a warrior who refused to follow hate. The world was watching now, and for the first time in years. There was a crack in the wall between species. A small one, but enough for light to pass through. The human soldier who defied all odds to save a paralyzed alien. Warrior rain fell over the mountain base as sirens echoed in the distance. Thunder rolled across the sky like drums of war. Ray Walker stood in the observation room, hands cuffed, heart steady. On the screen in front of him, a red warning flashed. Zarkon war, fleet incoming. He had hoped for peace. He had risked everything, even his name, to prove that enemies could be allies. But not everyone wanted peace. A rogue Zarkon faction had declared revenge. They believed Valoris's survival was shameful, a sign of weakness. Now, they were coming to erase that shame with fire. Ray turned to the guards beside him. "You need to let me talk to him," he said. The guard shook his head. "Orders are clear. You stay locked down." Ray looked at the window again. In the hangar below, Valor sat inside a sealed chamber, surrounded by armed guards. His eyes were closed. But Ray could see the weight in his face. He had become a symbol of change, of betrayal, depending on who you asked. The base shook as the first impact hit the outer defenses. The sky lit up with explosions. Panic spread through the halls. Soldiers rushed past Ray's cell. Some shouting, some silent. Ray took a breath. Then slammed his cuffs against the table edge. Again and again, until the lock cracked. The guards turned in shock. But Ray was already moving. He didn't attack them. Didn't run, he simply said, "If I don't get to him now, we all die." They hesitated. Then, one of them stepped aside. Ray ran down the corridor, through smoke and alarms. He reached the chamber where Valor was held. The guards there raised their weapons. "Stand down." Ray shouted, "He's not the threat the fleet outside is." One of the officers stepped forward. "Then why are they firing on us?" "Because they don't know the truth," Ray said. "But he can tell them." Valor opened his eyes and met Ray's. "I warned them," he said. "They didn't listen." "Then make them listen now," Ray replied. The officer shook his head. "We have no way to reach them. Comms are jammed." Ray turned to Valor. "Can you use your warbond signal?" Valor nodded slowly. "It's old tech, but they'll hear it." The officer gave a short laugh. "You really trust him to call off a fleet?" Ray stepped closer. "I trust him with my life." The officer looked at the chaos outside. Then at the warrior in the chair. "Fine," he said. "But this is on you." Ray walked beside Valor and helped him out of the restraints. They wheeled him to the main comms deck, where emergency systems were still online. Valor reached into his armor and pulled out the crystal Ray had returned. He placed it into the console, and the room filled with a low hum. A hologram of Zarkon script lit up the walls. Valor closed his eyes and spoke in his native tongue. The lights flickered as the signal pulsed into the sky. Outside, the battle paused. The ships in the sky hovered silently. Waiting then, a message returned. It was rough, angry, full of challenge. Ray didn't understand the words. But he saw the tension in Valor's face. "They want proof," Valor said. They want to see if I still stand for honor. Ray stood tall beside him. Then show them. Valor opened a direct channel and spoke again. His voice was strong now, full of fire. He told them the story of his survival. Of the human who saved him when he was nothing but a broken body under rubble. He showed them footage recordings Ray didn't know he had made. Moments of Ray dragging the stretcher, patching his wounds, shielding him from drones. The room went quiet as the fleet received the images. Then, one by one, the enemy ships began to power down their weapons. The warning lights faded from red to blue. The sky, once full of fire, began to clear. Ray let out a slow breath. It was over, or so he thought. A second explosion rocked the base, this time from inside. A group of radicals humans who believed Ray was a traitor had planted a bomb. They didn't want peace. They wanted war to continue. Ray turned just in time to see the wall shatter. Debris flew across the room and fire spilled in like water. One of the beams came crashing down toward Valor. Ray didn't think he dove forward. Pushing the stretcher aside, the beam crashed onto Ray's back. Pinning him down, pain exploded through his body. But he held on. Valor reached for him. His arm shaking. "You gave me my life," he said. "Now let me give you mine." But Ray smiled through the pain. "Not your time yet, brother." Rescue teams arrived moments later. Pulling them both from the wreckage, they were alive, barely. But the fleet had witnessed everything, and for the first time in history, a human and a Zarkon were honored by both worlds together. Asterisk the human soldier who defied all odds to save a paralyzed alien warrior. The war didn't end in a single day. But something changed on that mountain. Something powerful. Something that couldn't be destroyed by bombs or orders. It started with a broken soldier and a dying alien warrior. It ended with a spark of peace no one saw coming. Ray Walker woke up in a medical station 3 days later. His back was bandaged, his ribs broken, his arm in a sling. But he was alive, and so was Valor. The first thing Ray saw when he opened his eyes was the crystal warbond hanging above his bed. It glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Next to it was a note, handwritten, not typed. "You saved me," it said. "Now I will save them." Ray sat up slowly, pain biting into every movement. A nurse came in and gave him water. "You've got visitors," she said, smiling. Important ones. Ray didn't ask who. He already had a feeling. 2 days later, they moved him to a high-security chamber, but not as a prisoner this time, as a witness. The Human Council wanted to hear his story, so did the Zarkon elders. For the first time in galactic history, a joint session was held. 2 species, side by side, listening, not shouting. Ray stood before them. Bruised and tired, but proud, he told them everything. Not just the facts, but the feelings, the fear of being alone on the battlefield. The choice to save a life instead of taking one. The long journey through enemy land with a stretcher and hope. And the bond that formed, not through language, but through action. The hall was silent when he finished. Even the Zarkon leaders, who rarely showed emotion, gave a small nod of respect. Then Valor entered the chamber. He now wore a sleek, black exoframe attached to his spine. He couldn't walk yet, but he could stand with support. The room watched in silence as he moved beside Ray. He looked at the humans, then at his own people. "I was trained to fight," he said. "Trained to hate, but I was wrong. I saw in this human something I had never seen in my own commanders. Compassion, honor, and courage." He raised the crystal bond in his hand. "I offered this," he said, "not as a weapon, but as a bridge." A council member asked, "And what do you want in return?" Valor looked at Ray, then back at the council. "Not war," he said. "Just a chance." That word echoed through the chamber like thunder. A chance, that's all it ever took. Over the next months, things began to shift. Slowly, carefully, but surely, joint missions were tested rescue operations. Science teams, training squads. Ray was no longer called a traitor. Now, they called him something else. Ambassador, he never wanted the title, but he accepted it, because it meant something bigger than himself. He worked side by side with Valor, speaking at forums, helping design new codes of battlefield conduct. No forced alliances, no false smiles, just honest truth. One day, Ray stood in front of a group of young recruits. Some human, some Zarkon, all wearing the same uniform. He held up the Warbond crystal. "This," he said, "isn't a weapon, it's a promise, that no matter where you're from, or what you look like, your life matters, not just to your people, but to others too." The room was quiet, and for the first time in generations, the silence wasn't fear, was respect. On the anniversary of the mountain battle, a statue was raised. It stood in the middle of the joint training base, surrounded by forests and skies, two figures side by side. One human, one Zarkon, not fighting, but holding each other up below it. A plaque read, "To those who chose mercy over war, honor over hate, and brotherhood over blood, let this remind all that the strongest soldier is the one who protects." Years later, Ray sat under the shade of the monument. Older now, with silver in his hair, Valor sat beside him, his exoframe now sleek and silent. They didn't speak much anymore. They didn't need to. Everything had already been said. Ray looked at the new recruits running drills nearby. He smiled, tired, but proud. "It was worth it," he said. Valor nodded. "All of it," and together they watched a future they helped build one step. One sacrifice, one decision at a time. The human soldier who defied all odds to save a paralyzed alien warrior. Years passed, and the galaxy slowly healed. Scars of war still marked the stars. But new voices had begun to rise. Voices of unity, not division. Voices shaped by two warriors who refused to let hate be their only story. In a distant space academy built on neutral ground, young cadets trained under a new banner, not of one species, but many. The banner showed two hands, one human, one Zarkon gripping each other in strength. Below it were 5 words, "No life left behind." Ever among those cadets walked a girl named Elara Walker, Ray's daughter. She had her father's sharp eyes and calm focus. But she had her own fire too. She was not born during the war. She was born during the peace that came after, but she carried its weight like armor. Her classmates didn't treat her like a celebrity. They treated her like one of their own. Because she never talked about who her father was. She let her actions speak louder. One evening, as the stars blinked above the academy dome, Elara stood alone on the observation deck. She held a small black box in her hand. Inside it was the Warbond crystal, now old but still glowing. It had been passed down to her from Ray, who had passed away 2 years ago. Peacefully, in his sleep, the galaxy had mourned. Zarkon and human alike lit fires on their home worlds. They called him the Bridgemaker, the Guardian of Mercy, but to Elara, he was just Dad. A man who carried pain quietly, who taught her to always choose right over easy. Behind her, footsteps echoed. Valor approached, now even older. His exoframe upgraded, but his face lined with time. He placed a hand on her shoulder, strong yet gentle. "He would have been proud," he said. Elara smiled. He didn't like attention. He never wanted to be a hero. Valor looked at the stars. That's what made him one. They stood in silence for a while, watching a new transport ship arrive. On board were not soldiers, but scientists, builders, and artists. The new wave of explorers, not conquerors. "Tomorrow," Elara said, "we begin the joint expansion into the frontier worlds." Valor nodded. "And you'll be leading the first team." She nodded back. He told me to go where no hate follows, and if I find it, there burn it down with truth. Valor chuckled. A true walker. Later that night, Ilara entered the Hall of Memory, a quiet, sacred place at the center of the academy. It held no weapons, only names. Names of those who chose peace in times of war. At the center stood a new statue just placed the week before. Ray and Valor again, but this time with a child standing between them. Holding both their hands, the child had no face. It could be anyone. That was the point. A voice played quietly in the hall. Recorded from Ray's last speech before he died. I didn't save Valor because I thought it would change the galaxy. I saved him because it was right, and sometimes doing the right thing is enough to move stars. Ilara knelt before the statue and placed the glowing crystal at its feet. "I'm ready now," she whispered. The next morning, her ship launched, a mixed crew of humans, Zarkon. And even newer allied species stood behind her. They passed through the outer rim, into the unknown. Their mission wasn't conquest, was connection. They landed on a planet never touched by war. As she stepped onto the soil, Ilara smiled. She looked back at her team and said, "Let's build something better," far behind her. On Earth and Zarka Prime, stories of Ray and Valor were taught in schools. Not as legends, but as examples. Kids didn't play soldiers anymore. They played rescuers, healers, and guardians. The galaxy hadn't forgotten the war. But it remembered what came after, a time when one human soldier defied all odds. Not with power, but with heart, and that legacy. It lived on in every handshake between species, in every peaceful colony, and in every heart that believed that saving one life could save the future.